It's never too early to start a savings account. Opening a savings account is a great way to learn money management skills while blazing a path to better financial success later in life. Crane Credit Union will reward you for good grades while also teaching you to save with our Pays to Get A's savings account. Open an account today and help yourself financially succeed.
Hey everybody, welcome to the WTWO Weather Workshop. Savannah and I are going to take a little time and explain some of the things that we do behind the scenes when it comes to forecasting weather. We're going to focus today mostly on weather instruments. Some of those are things here on the surface of the earth, some float through the atmosphere, and some of them are even in outer space. But these are weather instruments that we use to put together a weather forecast. Some are inside the building and some are outside. So we're going to talk about those. We can't cover all of them today, but we're going to cover some of the more important ones that we use here when we're putting together our forecast on a daily basis. And then after that, Savannah's going to give you a little behind the scenes look about how we put together the show, from the graphics, how we click through those graphics on the air, and then also the magic of television. How do we do the weather? Because it's interesting to see how it's done behind the scenes, and she's going to show you that as well. We're going to start though by going outside, so we'll jump outside to Savannah. She's going to show you how we measure snow and rain here at the TV station.
Thank you, Jesse. One thing we measure here at the WTWO studio is snowfall. The first thing we do before it snows is set the snowboard somewhere on the ground. We set this down so we can find it once it does snow here, and then we put this ruler down just to measure it. We lift it up and see how much snowfall we got. Now we measure snowfall in tenths of an inch instead of 16ths of an inch. The other thing we do is measure rain here at the WTWO studio. So we take this, and this is in hundredths of an inch. So the first thing we do is take this off, set it on the ground, and then we can see how much rain fell here at the studio just by putting this in and then taking it off. We did get a little bit rain overnight last night. This is how much rain we got. So we do measure rain and snow here at the WTWO studio. Now we'll head over to Jesse so we can learn about wind and temperature.
First of all, this looks like a birdhouse, but this is actually called a weather shelter box. We make it white to reflect the sunlight so it doesn't heat up. It's also louvered, if you notice, so air can flow through it. It's got a double roof up here, and it's also over a grassy area. It's not near trees. It's not real close to the building. And another interesting fact, and I'll come back to this, is it's about 5 feet off the ground. That's what we standard for all weather shelter boxes. The door on this is on the north side because when we open the door, we don't want the sun to shine in. So when we open the door on these weather boxes, inside there are weather instruments, primarily thermometers, because we're measuring temperature. And inside here, we've actually got one thermometer that we use, and this one here is called a maximum and minimum thermometer, and it tells me the high and the low temperature of the day. On the inside of this thermometer, there's a silver liquid called mercury. And as the temperature goes up, on the top end of this, there's actually a little bit piece of metal in here. And what happens is that metal will go up until that we reach the high of the day. And then when it goes back down, that metal marker stays there, telling us the high of the day. On the other side, it's the opposite. We also have a metal marker on this one, and that one records the low temperature of the day. So it's a mercury-filled thermometer, which shows us the high and the low temperature of the day, or what we call maximum minimum. If you're watching the news and we say the high today was 85 degrees, we use a thermometer just like this one. Now, a couple of interesting points. It was on this thermometer back in January of 1994, we recorded the all-time record low for this area when we hit 31 below zero. It wasn't the wind chill, it was the air temperature, and we recorded it on this right here in this weather shelter box. A couple of other interesting points about temperature. Remember, we measured the temperature inside the shelter box so it's in the shade. So in the summer, if we tell you it's going to be 90 degrees, we always forecast and report the temperature in the shade. So 90 degrees is in the shade. If you're going to be in the sunshine in the summer and we're forecasting 90, it could be up to 20 degrees higher or 110. So always remember, the temperature is forecast and recorded in the shade. The last thing I wanted to point out is we take the temperature about 5 feet off the ground because most people's heads are about 5 feet off the ground. It doesn't matter what the temperature is at the ground or at the top of the building, 5 feet off the ground. If you've ever wondered how you can have frost, and we say the temperature is 36 or 37, that's above freezing, that's because the temperature at 5 feet off the ground was 36 or 37, but colder air is dense and it sinks, and at the ground it's cold enough for frost. So that's how you can have frost, and the temperature itself is not actually at the freezing point because of where we record the temperature is 5 feet off the ground. The other thing I want to talk about is the wind. Wind is very important to us, and we have wind instruments that we use. These wind instruments measure the wind direction and the wind speed. So first of all, at the top, we have an instrument called a wind vane or a weather vane, and it tells me the direction the wind is coming from. These always point into the wind. Sometimes you'll see them on a barn. It may look like a rooster or a chicken. Whichever direction it points is the direction the wind is coming from. That's important. So if this is pointing to the south, the wind is coming from the south. The bottom instrument has a weird name. It's called an anemometer. And any wind in any direction will catch those cups and cause them to spin. Faster it spins, the faster the wind is blowing. It sends that information on these wires to a computer, and we're able to tell you the wind, direction, and speed every day. We also record the strongest wind of the day as a peak wind gust. That's important to us when we have severe weather because we want to know how strong that wind is blowing. Now, I talked about the temperature is measured 5 feet off the ground. We can't really record the wind 5 feet off the ground because there's too many obstacles in the way. So wind is actually recorded at about 30 feet off the ground, and on top of the building we have the same exact instruments up there to measure the wind and also the wind speed and wind direction. So again, wind speed and direction are 30 feet off the ground and air temperatures are 5 feet off the ground. Okay, enough about that. One of the most important weather instruments that we have is called a Doppler radar, and Savannah's standing by in front of our Doppler radar here at the TV station.
Yes, Jesse, behind me is our Doppler radar. Not only can it show us where the rain and snow is, but it can also detect where the wind currents are. This is especially important when we get severe weather because it can show us where the rotation is in tornadoes. Now we'll head inside to Jesse.
Okay, we're going to talk about a few other instruments that we use, and this segment has a little kind of an interesting twist to it because I want to talk about instruments that we use at different levels of the atmosphere. I'm going to start by this one right here. This is actually called a barometer. Now, a barometer is an interesting weather instrument because it's kind of like a scale. When you get on a scale, it measures the weight, how much you weigh. So if you imagine this as a scale, the air actually has weight and is pushing down on it. We don't think about that because it's pushing down on you every day. So it's something you don't really think about. But the air actually does have weight. And we measure that weight by the thing called a barometer. And what happens is the higher the barometer reading, the better the weather. We call that high pressure. The lower the barometer reading, usually the more nasty the weather, we call that low pressure. If you're watching a weather map, highs and lows are on the weather map. And I always tell students at schools, the high pressure I always refer to as happy weather because it's nice weather. The low pressures I call lousy weather. If we're going to have a snowstorm or severe weather or rain, it's the low pressure that we're watching. So barometers, if we had to throw away most of our weather instruments, one that we would definitely keep is a barometer because it tells us if we've got good weather or bad weather coming. And on this barometer, by the way, there's a little needle in here. And what happens is we put this little needle right over the barometer reading, and then we come back hours later and we can see if the barometer is rising or falling because it's not only important about what the barometer reading is currently, but whether it's going up or going down to tell us what kind of change in the weather is happening. So a barometer, very important weather instrument. That one, by the way, is on the surface of the earth. We also have this thing. Now, this is part of a weather instrument. It's called a weather balloon. Some of you probably heard of that. The balloon used to be attached to this rope, and there was also a parachute attached to it. We take these things out twice a day, 7 a.m., 7 p.m., and we launch them all across the United States. The balloon will carry this box up into the atmosphere. And this box, actually, I'm holding onto a wire. That's a radio transmitter. It transmits back to the Earth important weather information such as the relative humidity or the wind or the air pressure, the temperature, as it goes tens of thousands of feet up into the sky. Because if you think about weather, it's three-dimensional. Rain, snow, sleet, even tornadoes come from up there, and we need to get up there with a weather instrument. So a weather balloon is that key instrument. Now, the cool thing about a weather balloon, as it goes higher in the sky, there's less air pressure, so the balloon expands and it gets bigger. That balloon can get as big as a small house. You put too much air in a balloon, it'll pop, and when it does, a parachute comes out, and this will float back down to the ground. Many times they're never found. This actually was found in the field next to our TV station. But a lot of times they never get found. They end up in a woods or in a creek or a lake. But if they are found, there's actually a bag in here you can take out, and you can actually send this back to the National Weather Service. This one got ran over by a tractor in the field, so it was destroyed. So we use it to take to schools. But weather balloons can go up to 100,000 feet into the atmosphere. So these things float up through the sky to determine what's happening with the weather, and they can even help us forecast things as complicated as tornadoes and whether or not we might have an ice storm. So weather balloons are really important. The last instrument I'm going to talk about is this. This is called a satellite. In this case, it's a water vapor satellite. They can tell us where there's moisture, where there's cloud cover, where storms are developing. And satellites, by the way, are in outer space. In this case, about 22,000 miles into space. So it's interesting that we have weather instruments like the barometer on the ground. We have weather balloons that float up to 100,000 feet into the sky, and we have satellites that are in outer space. So when you think weather instruments, it's not just on the ground, it's through the atmosphere and in outer space. All of these things help us to forecast what we're doing with the weather. So after we look at all of that information, the next thing we have to do is put it together into a weather forecast. And Savannah's going to show you the behind-the-scenes way that we prepare weathercasts here at WTWO.
Thank you, Jesse. When I get in at 4 o'clock in the morning, I head over to the computer. That's the first thing I do. I look at different models, precipitation forecasts, National Weather Service data, a lot of different things in what we need to make the show look the best and to get the forecast most accurate. So we go over to the computer, we look at a lot of stuff, we put together lots of graphics, basically a slideshow for you guys so we can display it on the green screen. So now we're on the green screen, but this is what it looks like for you guys when you're at home. We look at the camera, and we also have monitors on the left and right side of us so we can see the data, the numbers, everything coming in for us. And then we can also point to things and have our clicker, which we also move things with as well.
Well, I hope you've enjoyed this segment of our WTWO Weather Workshop. The weather is unpredictable here in the Midwest, especially in the wintertime, so it makes our job a little bit more challenging. And also, if we think about weather, it impacts everybody. No matter where you live, no matter what happens, the weather impacts everybody. So our job is pretty important to try to keep everyone informed of changing weather, especially in times of severe weather and especially with winter weather now moving across the valley. So those are things that we pay close attention to. Hopefully you learned a little bit more about weather instruments, how we use them to forecast the weather here in the Wabash Valley, and also with Savannah's help, maybe you understand a little bit more about how we put together a weather show now. And when you're watching weather on TV, now you have a little better idea of the behind-the-scenes look of what we do. So we hope you have enjoyed the WTWO Weather Workshop. We'll see you next time.
It's never too early to start a savings account. Opening a savings account is a great way to learn money management skills while blazing a path to better financial success later in life. Crane Credit Union will reward you for good grades while also teaching you to save with our Pays to Get A's savings account. Open an account today and help yourself financially succeed.